Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the interview room.
I've been dreaming so much lately about your face when you're smiling. It's the only thing that saves me.
Snoop on the
I don't know if I told you that I think you're beautiful.
Snoop on the stoop.
To hold you.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you pull me up when I'm falling down, and I don't know how I do without you. Yeah, you pull me up when I'm falling down.
There he is, Snoop Dogg.
Hey, now look into my eyes. You can use them as a mirror, baby. You're my ticket to paradise. Hey,
where are you from?
Everything's all right. We've been longing for each other, and it feels like I'm on cloud nine. I don't wanna be without you. This is something that I know for sure. It's just something about you. I just want more. Tell me what you wanna do right now. Tell me what you wanna do tonight. I really don't care as long as I'm with you. Hey, now look into my eyes. You can use them as a mirror, baby. You're my ticket to paradise. Hey, now everything's alright. We've been longing for each other, and it feels like I'm on cloud nine. Now look into my eyes. You can use them as a mirror. You're my ticket to paradise. Hey, now look into my eyes. You can use them as a mirror, baby. You're my ticket to paradise. Hey, now everything's alright. We've been longing for each other, and it feels like I'm on cloud nine. Yeah, you pull me up when I'm falling down, and I don't know how I would do without you. Yeah, you pull me up when I'm falling down. Yeah, you pull me up when I'm falling down, and I don't know how I would do without you. Yeah, you pull me up when I'm falling down. Yeah, it feels like I'm on cloud nine.
I feel like I'm on cloud nine with everybody with us tonight. And happy birthday, Sebastian, 17 years old. Thank you, Julie. We're so grateful that each and every one of you are a part of this amazing YouTube channel called The Interview Room. But it's only amazing because of you. It's not because of me. It's not because of Karen. It's not because of Budzo up there. It's because you have made our channel what it is today. And for that, we are grateful. And I can't thank you enough. And I can't thank our mods enough. Miss Sophia, Maui Girl, Mimi J2, Laura, and then Teresa. All of you who participate at that level, keeping this channel going in the right direction. We are so grateful for you as well. But more importantly, our subscribers, our channel members, our Patreon members, every one of you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You keep me on cloud nine. Okay, a little note here. Karen had twisted her back a little bit ago. She was doing something. And so she's just kind of in the background for a little bit. I know if we ask her, well, she'll probably jump in, but maybe not. She's not. She's just a little sore right now. And it sounds like it's Sebastian's 17th birthday today. Boy, man, oh man, that dad is going through a lot, right? That father's going through a lot. Hello to all of our friends from all around the world. I've got 3 things on the agenda tonight. We're going to talk about Summer Wells. We're going to talk about Mangione, Macaroni. I don't know how they even pronounce his name. And then, of course, Bryan Kohberger, who not only is complaining about his bananas, but there are a lot of people in the prison that are thinking about sending him some love. And so that's going to be kind of our, foundation for this evening's conversation. We've had a lot going on, this last week, with all 3 of these cases, with Summers, of course, with the TBI and the Hawkins County and the FBI all going out to the property at 35 in the 3500 block of Van Hill Road. And there's a lot of, things, circulating online about, can dogs smell? Can they do this? What does it mean? How far does it go, et cetera. And, I know a little thing about, just a little about dogs. I mean, I was only a dog handler for 4 years. Okay. But, during that time, I had a dog named Irk the Jerk, and Irk was a Schutzen. And he was, as you may or may not know, this is him right here with yours truly. Mustaches were optional. However, if you wanted to be, stylish in the groove, you had a mustache. And, but anyway, Irk was a Schutzen, German Shepherd from Germany. All of his commands were in German, like this was Geblaut, which was bark. And he also knew hand signals, Platz, which is down, Varan, Fui, which is no, yada, yada. Okay. And all that we used to do is we had street work, and we also did scent work, searching, not only on the ground, but we did air scent when he was looking for bad guys in buildings and that kind of stuff. And we ate a lot of bad guys after, pursuits and that kind of stuff. It was greatest job in the world. I got to be honest with you. Nothing like, going 80 miles an hour. And at the end of it, the guy decides to bail out and he takes off and, he's got a fur coat right behind him at Mach 1. And, boom, they end up meeting each other. It wasn't on Tinder back then. It was, it was literally, you get to wear this German Shepherd. And, there, he was amazing, absolutely amazing. And he saved my butt. I can't tell you how many times and how many other officers that he saved. Um, and later on one day when we have another show about, the wall of shame back there, you can see Irk right there. That's him right there in this particular picture. Um, but he was an absolute chainsaw. And back then, as you can tell, our cars we didn't have the bars and the windows and all that stuff. We had that sign right there. It says, "Keep away, police dog." Okay. And that was it. That was it. And so if drunks came by and, they want to stick their heads in the window and kiss the dog, well, they got an opportunity to actually meet the dog head on, as we'll call it. Sometimes a lot of drunk Marines back in the day, Lance Corporal Bag of Donuts, with his buddies and wants to stick his head in the car window. And it's not like kissing Buddy in the corner up there, and I can't tell how many times I pried somebody's face off of Irk. It was a magical time. So, that's the first thing I want to start off with is how these dogs work, right? Scent dog, if it's a tracking dog, if it's an article search dog, if they've been cross-trained into as a dope dog, etc. Now, Irk did both. He did tracking and he did what we would call, protection work, man work. And those of you who have been on my channel for some time know that I had Manny on here. Manny was one of our trainers. And when I became a dog handler in 1986 to 1990, before I got transferred into homicide, I'd just come out of Vice. And because I did, 2 years in Vice, then they transferred, the dog opportunity opened up. I had to go through all the stuff, go through the board, get certified, talk to the trainers. They said, okay, fine. Yeah, he could actually do it. And then you got assigned a dog. Well, my dog was already a street dog, the Irk, the one you're seeing here. And then they sent us to school, and the dog got used to us because I was a second handler. His first handler was a dear friend of mine named John Radcliffe, and we used to call him Lips. Lips had Irk before me, and so he'd already been on the street a couple years. And so basically I had to learn how the dog, functioned, and the dog had to figure me out, which wasn't very hard. And so when we put him up when I got into the car with him, Irk pretty much already knew what to do. But I didn't know how he was going to do it, obviously being a new dog handler. So they sent us to school together for quite, I think it was like 8 weeks, 2 months almost. And we learned each other. And those kind of things, paid off. And I learned how to, stick his nose to the ground. And, back then we used to just take the leash. We had a 30-foot lead. You'd wrap it around. You could tie it underneath his neck a certain way, and not here, but actually more of his chest area. And it would pull his head down, towards the ground. You could actually put it up through his leg, and then through his right front leg and pull it up, and it will pull his head down to the ground. And once you get that, okay, and that dog gets on that scent, it depends on if you do an article search, or an article scent, or if it's going to be an air scent. If it's an air scent, you're not going to stick his nose to the ground. You're going to let him run. But if it's like a surface scent of some sort, you want to start with an item. And if it's a bad guy that jumped out of a car and left a shirt or something like that, you want to, let the dog get a scent on that. And then you can, kick them loose and let them go after the guy. And you have a 30-foot lead. So, you're back behind way behind the dog. And when he goes on the bite, you drop it and you let him, get the bad guy. Now that's if your dog's cross-trained. Okay. There are other dogs that aren't cross-trained that are just tracking dogs, and that's the kind of dogs that they utilized in the summer well search. If you'll see their hounds, their, that kind of stuff. And so those are typically scent dogs, but their noses go to the ground. They don't air scent. Okay. Because Irk was cross-trained, he could do both. Okay. And it takes hundreds and hundreds of hours for these trainers and, these dog guys to train the dogs to do that. Remember, the handler is just that. He's called a handler, or she's called a handler, because that's all they are. Irk lived with me. He lived with our family. That car was a take-home vehicle, and Irk was a service dog. They go to work. All those dogs go to work. So they're not pets. The city would put, they put a kennel in your backyard. At least the agency I worked with, I had my own kennel. I had to buy the food. I had to feed him. I had to bathe him, take him to the vet, all the stuff. And so we become partners. We're never separated. And you also can get called out in the middle of the night, for searches or something to that effect. So I've had a lot of experience with Irk and his ability to search. I think he scored a 96 in Schutzen training. And what Schutzen is in Germany, where Irk came from, Schutzen is basically a sport. And what it is the decoys hide behind like these blinds. And the dog scent searches, right? Try to find the bad guy. And the handler, sends voran, go find him, and sends him on with a hand signal. Okay. And the dog in Germany as a sport goes out. And those of you in Germany perhaps are familiar, and you can chime in on the chat here. The dog goes out, looks for the decoy, and when he finds it, the dogs are trained to what they call guard and bark. And what that means is they go up to the decoy, and without biting them, okay, they jump up and down and they bark in front of the decoy. So the decoy stands like this, and the dog is in front of them, barking like, "Hey, Dad, hey, Mom, I found him. He's right here behind this blind." And it's a sport, and they rate them, and they win trophies, they win all kinds of stuff. Well, Irk I think he got a 96 on one of the competitions, and it was the scent competition, and so he was a very valuable animal. Well, our city bought him, and we had him shipped over from Germany, and that's when John got Lips, Radcliffe. John was his first handler, and so John had to work with Manny, and if you have not seen that show on with Manny, that guy's fascinating, and it's in my playlist. He's a man. I think Canine Man is the name of his company, but they're out of Southern California. Anyway, Irk had to be taught how to not guard and bark, but go in on the bite. And so what we did is we did a lot of demos with him. Let me show you right here. Here's one. Right. Here's a picture. Anyway, this was in the paper. I just pulled it up. And this is Manny here. That's that. I think that is me. I'll be darned. In the newspaper back in the day. Anyway, that said, you can see that Irk's on the bite here. And this was a demo we were doing with, for the community, yada, yada. But the cool part about it is those kind of dogs are machines. You can turn them on or you can shut them off just by a command. And, when you think about how impressive that is and how smart these guys are, it's really pretty amazing. And so when you put them on a search, their senses are, just thousands of times more powerful than the human scent, and they can pick things up pretty quickly. Okay, so here's one of the things that I want everybody to keep in their pocket during the Summer Wells case when we talk about the dog trail. Now, mind you, remember, I was up on that property with Don, with Candace. And when Don called me, he was the one who introduced the conversation to me about a dog trail. And the authorities were up there, which would have been a natural thing. Remember, I got involved in the Leticia Hernandez case, because I did the search for Leticia, just like that guy did the search for Summer. I was the equivalent of that in the Leticia Hernandez abduction. Now, she was an actual abduction. Okay? And Irk had scented her trail into just outside of her front yard. Now, why am I bringing this up even in the Summer Wells conversation? Because even if they scented the dog with a piece of clothing or something like that, they're at a disadvantage. The reason being is Summer is running all over that property. Okay? The dog does not know when that scent was put on that property. The dog is just given the command to seek or, search or whatever the command the handler uses to activate that behavior within the animal. So when Don first told me about the dog trail and that a dog allegedly went to the road, and he said it's, down that dog trail. I've heard other things that it was maybe down the driveway. I don't know. Okay. I didn't put a lot of credit into that aspect of the problem because two things. We don't know, or what we can say is, yeah, of course her scent could have been down there because the little girl's running around the whole property for 4 years, almost 5 years before that. So you would expect her scent to be on that road, or on that property. Now, where the curveball comes is this idea of, well, the dog lost the scent at the bottom, once the dog got to the road. Okay. Well, that's maybe one of two things. Maybe she wasn't at the road. And as a dog handler, you would have to go, okay, well, we got a problem here. What's that? Well, the dog came down the road here, or down this, whatever it's going to be, that one trail or the driveway. And we won't know till the authorities actually tell us. So I'm not going to guess. Okay. But that dog, if you would have taken Wiley's shirt and stuck it in his face, that dog probably would have sent Wiley all around the property, or the other children, or even Candace, or even Don. The dog would have scented all of them. Okay. So what the authorities were looking for was to have the dog go off of the property, because then that would have given them, and it would have actually, I would have been like, okay, we got something going here. Okay. Because the dog now has left the property. But what has happened, and even Waylon, okay, you're right. Any of the kids would have been scented by that dog easily because they live there. They run the property. There's videos of Summer running after the motorcycle. And by the way, don't forget, both Candace and Don told me personally that trail used to be a mini bike trail. And the kids would go down that trail and then come back up the road, up the driveway and around. And that's why you have this round dirt. Not only, you got two things. You got the dirt track around their house. And then the kids would expand that track down that road, down that trail to the road and come back up. And so there's video, remember, of Summer running after the kids, her brothers, on their mini bikes. So they would ride their mini bikes down that trail. Well, when this thing happened, that now turned into the dog trail. Okay. And Don had been bugging me to, well, you know what, do you want to go down the dog trail? And I said, well, what was it used for? And he told me, and that's where this conversation, evolved. And so I was like, well, because I was on the property, I was like, well, I don't have to go down there. I can see there's a little trail going down there. Okay. But it's really steep in some parts. Okay. And that goes out to the front on that Ben Hill Road. Okay. So the dog goes down that trail. The dog loses a scent. So now what's been added to this whole conversation is, well, there must have been that red truck at the road. Okay. There is no evidence there was a red truck at that road. There is a conversation with a witness who said there was a red, he believed, or maroon Toyota Tacoma in the area at the time. So now, if we connect this back to this Randy guy, which is the latest conversation about owning a red, Toyota Tacoma and being attached to the property out there on Van Hill Road, okay, and he's fired that day for cutting, the lines, okay. Well, then we have to say to ourselves, okay, what was the opportunity that he had, independent of the other tree people, to get Summer Wells into his vehicle and kidnap her? And that's what the authorities have not been able to connect. And this is why when we read the Amber Alert, it's important to remember the Amber Alert clearly says in the very beginning, the authorities did not believe this was an abduction. And in fact, they were hesitant to even initially put out an Amber Alert. Now, subsequently, they did because there was a red maroon / Toyota, they believed, with a rack, etc., and some buckets in the back or something to that effect. There was a conversation about that vehicle, and they needed to clear that vehicle. Okay. So now we can fast forward to today, 2025. 4.5 years later, the authorities are out there, and I'm just looking at my notes. I've got it written up here. The authorities are out there on Van Hill Road because of a investigative lead / tip. And so they go boots on the ground, and there's a lot of social media fireworks that take off almost right away because they're out there. And in that, there were suggested activities of soil sampling, they're sifting dirt, ATVs for broader coverage, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Well, we don't know any of that. We don't know any of that. The authorities have not had a press conference like they did in Fruitland and said, we believe Michael Vaughn's remains were here. Okay. The authorities have not said any of that. And at this point, if they're out on the property, they're not tipping their hat to anybody because the suspect knows they're out on that property if, in fact, it's connected to the disappearance of Summer Wells. So they're not hiding anything. And so the authorities by this point in the investigative phase, you're not worrying about whether the suspect's standing up on a hill with a set of binoculars watching you because he already knows you're there. Now, what I find interesting, okay, and is that mother and father have said absolutely butt kiss, nothing. And in fact, it's to the point where I had to go by, or I was at a Christmas party with our church group last night, and shout out to my cuff. You guys know who you are. And I got, as a white elephant gift, Snoop on the Stoop. So I got me a Snoop on the Stoop gift, and this is way cool because he comes with some accessories. He comes with Snoop glasses. I don't know if you can see that. And he comes with a Snoop hoodie. I mean, this is the real deal. I'm sure he does the Crip Walk. If I ask him to, Snoop is a cool dude. He doesn't come with a roll, though. He's not going to roll a joint in front of me. So we're going to let that ride. Okay. So the evidence right now is as credible as Snoop on the stoop. I think we can all do the math right now. We don't know. Okay. So, but what we do know, okay, is there's a lot of information that's been put out there most recently, right? And, some of the official statements that, there's the agency has stressed TBI that this is an active investigation and it's ongoing. And I've heard people say, well, the FBI just wouldn't have shown up. Yeah, they would have. Okay. I don't want to break it down so simply, but the FBI stands for field belt inspectors. Okay. They're attorneys with suitcases with guns. Some of them are accountants. Okay. And they show up when you pick up the phone and say, hey, we need some resources. Or if they got the tip, then they're going to send their resources to make sure that the tip was followed up on. I don't know where the tip originated. Did it originate with the FBI? Did it originate TBI? Did it originate with Hawkins County? Okay. They may have only been there as observers, or their evidence collections team could have been there, but I don't know if anybody saw the evidence collection bus. Those of you who are actually in the area that live there, did you actually see the evidence van like they brought to the backyard of Daybell? If you didn't see that, then it was it was a lead that they had to check the box. They had to check up on it. Now, if they found something, okay, we're not going to know about it anyway. Right? If something was found in the backyard in Fruitland, the public didn't know about it until the until the chief came out and said, look, here's what happened. Here's why we're there. Here's why we dug it all up. Okay? It's the same scenario. So, a couple things to consider. If Summer was outside, the dog would naturally pick up her scent. That's a given. Okay? One of the things I have always felt was weird was the fact that they had like 16 or 18 dogs at that time. And as Don said, they all left for the day. You want to talk about dogs? Let's talk about dogs. Has anybody seen 18 dogs leave a property the exact same day a 5-year-old disappears? Maybe they knew there was a search coming. I don't know. Okay. But Candace was very specific about, well, the dogs weren't around that day. Don plugged it into his narrative that the dogs were on vacation. Exactly. The dogs were on vacation. Where is this? Yeah, in and outs. Exactly. They went on vacation. Right. Now, granted, I've only had dogs my whole life. Okay. I was a dog handler. I was a canine handler 4 years. Used to apprehend criminals, a lot of them, with my little chainsaw. Okay. I got paperwork that says, hey, good arrest by IRC. Okay. Now, when I got up on that property, Karen and I, when you first hear us driving up, you can hear all of these dogs barking and coming out of the woods. All right, so let's do some math here. Total stranger in the area, red truck, maybe working down with the tree guys. Let's add the dogs to the tree guy conversation. Now, is the dog ignoring all the tree guys too because they're on their way out? Do the tree guys see any dogs? Because they're up the hill and they'd been there for a couple of days. Remember the helicopter shot where they're trimming all the lines back? Okay. Those dogs are critical to logic. Now we can jump into footprints on the property. Up at the neighbor's property, and everybody's saying, well, those are legit. Those are a kid's footprints. And the problem is they're going up the hill. They're not, and the tree trimmers are down the hill where the truck is. Okay. So does Summer decide to go up the hill? Or is she down the hill where the abductor is? Or the abductor takes her out of the basement, okay, and then runs her back, as Don says, maybe with her mouth covered and she can't breathe. And he throws her into the car and they drive away. And nobody sees it. Nobody sees it. And now she's gone. And that's how he knew that she had been abducted, the very moment. Because in his heart of hearts, he said, when I was driving over there, I just knew she was gone. And when you listen very carefully, right? When you listen very carefully, he also says he saw her in a dungeon and that maybe they were essaying her, that they were maybe torturing her. And these are his words, by the way. The same way the abductor had his hand over her face and she couldn't breathe going down the dog trail. And now that morphed into, I'll probably see her into the resurrection. Now, I think it's really, really interesting that their behavior right now, you would think if Brandy knew that Michael was at a certain location, do you think Brandy and her family wouldn't be in a car headed that way and standing there waiting for any kind of information? Well, guess what? That the cops actually told her, you need to stay home. And they told her what they were doing. In this situation, the parents don't want anything to do with this because they're worried that it will just turn up, more social media problems for them. Okay. Not that, hey, by the way, let you know we got a great lead here. Could be summer. We'll let you know. We'll keep you posted. Okay. Well, that's not what the parents are looking for. They declined media interviews following the search, stating they prefer to receive updates directly from TBI rather than through news outlets. In prior statements around the 4-year anniversary, they expressed ongoing hope and belief in an abduction scenario, describing the years as a nightmare. And then social media posts from, the media manager notes the family's radio silence post-search, interpreting as a sign of emotional strain. Emotional strain. Okay. So there's a broader sentiment, in my opinion, of frustration, okay, over the lack of closure in this particular event and a lack of appreciation for law enforcement and their persistence in this from the family. So this could be a speculative development of a significant event in a law enforcement perspective. Okay. So I think that's really important for us to keep in mind, that this could be something really big, or it could be absolutely nothing. And until the authorities come out and make that linkage, okay, we need to dial it back in terms of, did the dog go to the road? Yes. Did he lose the scent? Yes. So what does that mean? Is it because she was always running on that property and the dog lost the scent? But people now have her in a car off of the property. All right. Now that could be. But the last time she was seen, she wasn't seen running around the property. Unless the mother is lying. Let's tell it the way it is. Either mother's lying or the boys are lying about where Summer went. Where Summer went. Because according to Mom, keep an eye on your sister. And according to Mom, where's Summer? According to the boys, through the mother, which is hearsay, she's down in the basement, Mom, playing with her toys. According to Don, the very first news presentation, the mother says she's down in the basement playing. So now, let's take the guy in the red truck. Let's think from his perspective. Excuse me. Well, I know Don and Candy. Known them for a while. In fact, they're related to maybe one of my brothers in terms of friends. And I know that Summer just got back from the store about 15 minutes ago. And she's up there in the basement. Time for me to get up there, up the dog trail, and park my vehicle right here so that nobody sees it but me. And then Don, who's going to introduce the conversation. And I'm going to go up that dog trail because I know that either A, Summer's going to be outside because somehow she got outside of that basement, or I'm just going to go in and get her because I know she's going to be there. Right? That's the scenario of a stranger abduction. And so you have to put her outside of the house for her to get into a car to get abducted, okay, by a stranger. All right. So now let's reverse that. Mom says she jumps right up. You know the story. She's in the basement. Mom says, I go down in the basement. I holler into the basement. And then I go down there. And she's gone. What? She's gone. So I run up and I tell the boys, go look for your sister. And the mother sends 3 other children out to where their sister had just been abducted by a stranger. You know what? I got 3 more. I might as well let them go out and find her with me and put their lives at risk as well. Just saying. So then she doesn't know what to do. Summer's gone. So what do? You jump in a truck and you drive around looking for Summer. But before you do that, you're on a cell phone that doesn't work. So you throw that back in the back of your mom's truck. And then you go grab another phone because the cell service up there is so bad. And you call Donnie. Donnie, I can't find Summer. Well, have you looked everywhere? Yeah. I've looked everywhere. I can't find her. Well, you better call 911. Okay. I'm going to call 911. And you better call 911, Donnie. Okay, I'm calling 911 to tell them that you can't find Summer. Okay. Everybody calls 911. Dispatcher gets a conversation with the mother who says she's out walking around. The mother, she's out walking, looking for Summer. Okay. Now you get Don on the phone with dispatch. We don't know what he said. That's going to be a great day when we hear that conversation. But what we do know is somehow Candace now jumps back in the truck and is driving around the area while the police are also responding. And now we hear this conversation from Don on the way back 40 minutes away on a Facebook Messenger video conversation with Candace. And in that, he's not losing any connectivity on his way in. And he gets there before the police, before the po-po. Before the 5-0. Before Snoop can say 5-0, Don Candace is on the scene, or Don Wells is on the scene before the 5-0. Remember, he got there before the police. Okay? But rather go up there, I see my 3 boys down by the creek. They're searching. So let's see. It sounds like before the police got there, according to Don, that there's 45 minutes gone by, maybe 30. Let's give them 30 minutes. The 3 boys down by the creek, down by the road there, have been searching for their missing sister for over 30 minutes already when Don pulls up, and the police haven't even been there yet, according to Don Wells. Because the first thing he says is, when I pulled up, I see my boys. So I decide to go to the shed down at the bottom of the hill. Now, I'm not a mathematician or the sharpest tool in the shed, but I'll tell you what, I've listened to some pretty good stuff in my time. And I also recognize a crip walk when I see it. Okay? And for me, that one's not making much sense. And because what the popo says is they got there before Don got there. And that math ain't mathing. It's not lining up. Okay. So now, let's presuppose that the abduction theory introduced by DW, okay, is just air to fill the gap. So now what do we have? What are we left with? Well, we're left with Summer Wells last being seen allegedly by the brothers, the 3 brothers. They're the last people to see Summer Wells, the three boys. Okay? Because they say, Mom, she's down in the basement. We do not know what the forensics interviews are with the three boys. We don't know it. We don't know what they are. But we know they occurred. Okay? So let's hypothesize. Let's say something happened to Summer, an accident. And let's use the accident scenario, hypothetically. So let's say something happened to Summer in the house where, I don't know, fell down the stairs, anything like that, and the boys were present when that happened, hypothetically. But there's no blood evidence in the house that the authorities found that I'm aware of, maybe somebody else is, that would indicate that there was a type of injury of some sort. But let's say they were outside playing, hypothetically, not in the house at all. And maybe Don's not at work, that he's on the property, which explains the text message maybe to Candace, maybe, that, you know, Andy or Randy, Hunter said it was Andy. He could have been wrong. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, it sounded like a NDY ending, Randy or Andy. And now the introduction concept of, yeah, somebody's up here, you know, trying to touch the kids. What kids? The boys? Because allegedly Summer's with her in the car going through the drive-through to get the prescription. So is it the three kids at home? And did Candace leave all three boys at home? Well, she didn't take them to the the water feature with Hunter to go fishing with Summer and Mom. So the boys are left at home by themselves and to play games or do whatever they want, run around, and there's some stranger running around the property up there. And apparently he's come across the boys. Because Don allegedly picks up the phone and calls her and said, "What are you doing? Where are you? There's somebody on the property." Well, how does Don know that? Do the boys call him first and say, "Dad, there's somebody here named Andy or Randy, and he's trying to touch us. You better call Mom and let her know." You see you see all the mishigosh that's going on here with these stories? Okay. I don't know about you, but I'm just not seeing the correlation here with a stranger. What I am seeing is this correlation with a lot of people not telling the truth. That just seems to be problematic for 110 Ben Hill Road. And so I'll go back to the very beginning of my first impression when I got up there. Number one, when I pulled up, there were at least 13, 14, 15 dogs that came out of the woods and were running around the property. They were everywhere. They were underneath the trucks. They were out by Summer Swing. There were some down by the dog trail. They were everywhere. Okay. It got the name dog trail not by accident, but, something going on there. Thank you. Right? You're very welcome. Here's my theory. I'm going over them right now, True Girl. And thank you for asking. I have still not left the basement or the house. Why? Why am I saying that? Because that's where Summer was last reported to be. And somehow everybody around her, including social media, has put her out of the basement into a scenario where now she's being seen in the back of a red truck and off to a property at, Van Hill. Now, is that possible? Of course it's possible. Is it probable? Not based on the conversations the family has given about the last circumstances she was last seen in. It's difficult to take that leap to a stranger abduction when you have the family giving you all of these different scenarios. We don't even know what the first conversations were or the multiple conversations were when they took him down to the PD. Remember the first time allegedly they took Candace down there, she was too high to take a polygraph. So the cops just said, "Oh, yeah, you know what? Come back tomorrow." Okay. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. Okay. And then they fill in the gaps after that. Meanwhile, grandma has hit the whoop-de-doo, right? And she's out of town with Snoop Dogg faster than Tupac and Shakur and Suge Knight in Las Vegas. Okay. They were crip walking out of there faster than anybody. Tupac didn't make it, but Suge sure did. And grandma, she's hitting the hoopy ride right out of town. And that's her granddaughter. You know what? What? You know what? She's missing. Okay. I gotta go. Okay. I gotta swoop. Okay. Where's my hoopty? Where's my ride? I gotta jump. Okay. Oh, and by the way, did I tell you my daughter's still not been found either? Go figure. Go figure. Let's see here. Now we've got a missing granddaughter and a missing grandmother and a missing daughter. We got three MIAs. Okay. And then when you start doing the math and you start thinking about this, okay, well, is it a possibility? Of course it's a possibility. The police put out there they're looking for a red truck. Okay. They probably found the red truck. But then we've got to step back and say, okay, well, then how does she get out of the basement? Well, there's only one concept that's presented itself. She went out the door. But that kind of goes in the face of Candace saying, I don't know if the door was locked or open. So you see, that's a problem for them to say. So they got to justify the door being open, which puts her in the yard. Or does she not even make it into the basement? And all of that is just, made up. Then you ask yourself, why is the mother making it up? Her daughter's been abducted. Why are you making up that she went into the cellar if you're convinced she's been abducted? Why is that? So that story has a lot of problems. That theory has a lot of problems of a stranger abduction. And then when you add the dog trail conversation, and then then you get to the end of the road where the dog loses the scent. Well, those dogs are cross-trained in all kinds of environments: grass, concrete, gravel, jello. Those dogs can go out there and find a lot of stuff. Okay. And they're trained to not just stop at the road and then come up with the conversation that says, hey, well, I think he got in a car. Do you honestly think my dog couldn't have tracked that child? I'm here to tell you, Irk could have tracked that child. And he may have even picked it up if there was a car involved, because the scent is still going to be coming out of that car. And the dog may have gone a certain distance down the road and may have lost the scent depending on how fast the car left. But he wouldn't have gone just down to the end of the road. He would have, if that's where Summer used to run, chasing the motorcycles, which she's on video, and you guys know, you guys have followed this from day one. Remember the video where Summer is chasing her little brother or her older brother on the mini bike. And I asked Don about that one day, and Don said, oh yeah, she used to chase them on the motorcycles. And he even says it on the phone call. Okay. So now we go to the other scenario: an accident, something happened. Maybe it's involving one of the other children. And that means at that point, it's a cover-up, whatever that means. Is there a vehicle involved in it? Is it a red truck? Do you go to your friends and you say, hey, dude, you got to help me? Something happened to Summer. I got to blah, blah, blah. Kind of like what just happened in Michael Vaughn. I've got an idea. It's in the affidavit. Okay. And they do whatever they got to do. Is that a possibility? Yes. It's a possibility. Is there somebody connected to Don or Candace that has a familiarity on that property and knows Summer, and something's going on with that piece of the puzzle? Yes. That's a possibility. Remember, Don tried to sell his first daughter, Sonia, when she was an infant. He actually was stopped by the other family members, his sister, who saw him on the corner with the baby and a sign. Okay. And got him in the car and said, what are you doing? Because he had a drug problem back then. Okay. I don't know if that leopard's lost its spots or not. That is still an option. And maybe she was handed off, and maybe that shed down at the bottom of the hill was much more important. And maybe the dungeon concept was, in play. Is it a possibility? Could be. Rare? Very, very rare. It's as rare as somebody pulling up on that property, parking in the driveway of a house that you're going to snatch a kid out of, and nobody seeing you in the holler. Now, that corridor is a drug corridor, so everybody's going up the top of the hill, to cop dope, and they're coming down and across the hall, where other people live, where people hear the screaming and all that stuff and, connections to that. There's a lot of possibilities, but the probabilities are closer to the house. Somebody had a familiarity with that house. Friends, neighbors, but not strangers. This isn't going to be I've never said it's going to be a stranger. Evident of the fact they just searched 9 miles away on a piece of property that could be connected to the house, meaning a friend connection. So they're not chasing, the invisible man here. They're chasing somebody that's somehow connected to that environment. So those are my theories on what's going on with that. Okay. And thank you so much. I'm not angry. Personally, I don't, not because I'm focused on keeping her in reality with not only social media, but for all of us and for Summer. There are answers there, and those answers will come. Okay. They will come. And I am confident that the resources are being put where they need to be put. I'm confident the authorities sat back and said, how come the parents aren't calling us? I'm confident they're taking notes every time the parents don't call and say, hey, I don't need to know what's going on, but can you tell us what is it Summer? Is it her? Did you find her? Because had they done that, and the parents were in no way, shape, or form on the table for investigative oversight, Don and Candace would be the first ones with their media manager on social media. Well, let me give you an example of how that actually works with Don and Candace. June of 2025. Don Wells and Candace Bly announced their dismissal of Tennessee Department of Children's Services case alleging abuse or neglect of their 3 sons. On the Family Wells channel, Don gets up there and says, I just want to let you know that we've been cleared of any wrongdoing to our 3 sons. That's all. Thank you. Now, if the authorities had found Summer, they had an obligation to call Don and Candace because they're the next of kin and their family. If there was any forensics evidence, if it went down to the medical examiner's office and an odontologist, let's say they found teeth, let's run with the pig theory. The pigs ate everything but the enamel on the teeth, and they found the tooth. And that tooth is matched somehow to some type of dental record. Or they extract DNA from the tooth. Now they're in a prisoner's dilemma if the parents aren't involved in any way, shape, or form. they have to notify those parents. I just want to let you know, just like the chief did in Fruitland, we believe that Michael Vaughn was buried in this backyard. They told the parents that before they told the public that. Why have we not heard any of that from Don and Candace? You see, probably because there's other reasons that we're not aware of. And it's probably maybe not connected to the red truck, but more along the lines of the Shady Bunch. Something's going on here. Okay. In fact, Don, Candace, you guys need to get yourself a Snoop on the stoop, because he can give you some advice, legal advice, about how it works in LA. Okay? I love Snoop, by the way. I love the dog. Okay? But he can give you some advice on the 5-0 and how the popo work on that side of the coin. But of course, you may not need that because you've been in prison multiple times and done multiple stints within the prison system. In fact, you've even visited places whereby you know that they were selling kids, and you've visited places like that, according to you, in the Los Angeles area. Maybe you did the Crip Walk with Snoop while you were out there recently for the Dr. Phil show. Because we noticed on the Dr. Phil show, Candace didn't want to talk then either. That's kind of interesting that Candace doesn't want to talk now, nor did she want to tell the world that she's looking for Summer. That, ladies and gentlemen, would be DLR. Doesn't look right, doesn't sound right, just doesn't feel right. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. Okay. Right? None of us know that, right? We're all just in this together for Summer Wells and Don and Candace. Right? That's why we're here. That's why we're having the show tonight for Don and Candace. All right, let's go to number 2. I talked about Kohberger, and by the way, so I have a source that pings me and goes, dude, you're not going to believe this. I'm like, what? He goes, guess what Pretzel Boy is doing now? I said, I have no idea. And that's when he told me about the bananas, the screwed up bananas. He didn't like the type of bananas he was getting in prison. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. No, I mean, you can't make this stuff up with that guy, right? He was getting bananas that probably look like this. Okay. So anyway, he hits me up and he says, yeah, he's getting all these bad bananas and he's upset, that the prison's not doing anything, and he's acting, like he's a little prima donna, because he's not getting the right bananas. And my first thought was, you do not want to mess around with hardcore inmates in a maximum security prison by telling them the food you're getting out of the kitchen aren't the right bananas. Because at some point, okay, he'll start getting visions of other types of bananas. And they may not have bruises on them. Okay? But either way, he is frustrating not only the other inmates, who, by the way, are continuing to taunt him to no end. Okay? To no end. And it's driving him crazy. And so what he's trying to do is he makes this statement of, you don't get me out of here. And this is, and I'm paraphrasing based on the information that was fed to me. He's telling the staff, well, if you don't get me out of here, I'm going to harm myself. Now that's very vague, very ambiguous. What does that mean, Bryan? According to, people. He's not saying I'm going to, whatever myself. He said, I'm going to harm myself. And so he's very vague and he's very calculating about the type of language that he has utilized. Okay. Well, my source thinks that he's trying to manipulate the system to get him transferred back out of J block back to the hospital ward. Remember that video where he's wiping down his little prison shoes, and he's got the remote control on the bed, the hospital bed. Okay. I mean, he's living right there in the Residence Inn. Because remember on the website, they call them clients and residents. They don't even call them inmates. So I think Bryan thinks he's at the Residence Inn. Maybe it's a Marriott property. I don't know. Okay. And so he's in there saying, you got to get me out of here. You got to get me out of here. Okay. Well, that's not going over very well with the staff. It's somewhat problematic, actually. Okay. So that's Bryan Kohberger. AKA, we'll call him Marge. Marge is upset. So film at 11. We'll see how that's going to play out ultimately. So let's talk about Luigi Mangione now. What's the latest there, right? He's accused currently of shooting, Brian Thompson on December 4th outside of the Manhattan Hotel. And no offense, by the way, if I have anybody in our chat named Marge, I love you, Marge, in our chat. But I got to give Bryan something, so please forgive me. Large Marge from Pee Wee Herman, when he jumped in the truck and she went ooh-wah with the large eyes, scared the crud out of him while he was looking for his bicycle at the Alamo. Okay, back to Luigi. So the most recent events, right? Just the other day, the last hearing on December 5th was canceled because Mangione got sick. Okay. He got sick, so they paused this multi-day hearing, suppression hearing that began on the 1st. So it's been running for 4 days. He gets sick, and so the court says, you know what, let's kind of shut this thing down for a little bit. And so what they're arguing is the admissibility of evidence that was collected by the law enforcement agency during his arrest. And so now the hearing is set for tomorrow, December 8th, to pick up again. But at this point, there aren't any more details about, how he's feeling. Okay. So what's at the core of the most recent dispute going on in the suppression hearing? The core that they're trying to do is Mangione's lawyers, led by Kevin Friedman and Mark, and I can't pronounce this guy's last name, so I'm not going to try. They're seeking to exclude items seized during his arrest on December 9th in 2024 and at the McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, where he was probably eating a Happy Meal. So the three items that they're arguing over was a 9mm handgun, which was a ghost gun, allegedly the murder weapon, and a silencer that was made, and a notebook which contained writings which the prosecution and the state has alleged outline his motive, which included phrases like the deadly greed-fueled health insurance cartel, quote unquote, and also his intent purpose, which says to whack, W-A-C-K in quotations, an insurance executive. So the third thing they're trying to squash is his post-arrest statements to police, arguing that his Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights had been violated and that his Miranda had been violated because he'd been interviewed, according to the defense, for a full 20 minutes by an officer who, quote, knew immediately he was the suspect in the murder. Okay. And there was a body camera played in court over the last, couple of 4 days. And that Luigi said, hey, I don't want to talk. Okay. So the argument is that an invocation of his rights? Okay. Well, Miranda is a two-pronged test. And the first prong is, are you in custody? Meaning there's no way you're free to leave. And that in your mind, the perpetrator feels in their mind, okay, that they are not just detaining, but when they do detain somebody, there is no way that person, no matter what he says or does, in his mind, he thinks, I can just get up and walk away. That's the first test. So if the defendant feels like he's stuck, even though he doesn't have bracelets on him, and he's going to be asked incriminating questions, which is the second test, that he will be making statements in violation of his own Fifth Amendment, that he would be incriminating himself through these statements, that is a violation of Miranda. And it is possible that conversation could get thrown out by the court. So two prongs. Does the suspect believe he's not free to leave? And is he being asked incriminating questions as a result of the officer's inquiry? Okay, now, the exceptions to that, what they call the exceptions rules, are if the officer is conducting an investigation and he or she has not definitively identified this is the guy, but they're in investigative mode and they have the right to establish a line of questioning that says, who are you? Where are you coming from? What are you doing? That kind of line of questioning concept, right? Okay. Now, what a lot of officers can do and what experienced homicide guys have done and others, okay, you may think they've committed the crime, okay, but you may not want to arrest them at that point. So what you'd want to do is say something to the effect, which did not happen for the record. Mr. Luigi, yeah, hey, I'm Officer so-and-so with the such and such agency. The reason we're contacting you here today is it appears you match the, identity of somebody that committed a homicide in New York City. Do you know anything about that? I'm not that guy. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Well, fair enough, right? We don't know if you're that guy either. Okay. However, you can understand we would have to make sure that we investigate this properly and correctly You're not under arrest. You're free to leave at any time. However, what we'd like to do is identify you. Okay. And for that, I have the investigative right to detain you to establish your identity. Do you understand that? Yes, I do. Okay. Then we're going to walk through this together. Okay. Is this your backpack? Yeah. May I look into it? May I search it? No. Okay. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That backpack is off limits. Stop-a-rama. You can't go digging through that thing, okay, unless you get a warrant or he gives you consent. And at any time, he can give consent during the police contact. But if he says, you know what, I don't want to talk to you, and you have not established that, in fact, that is the guy, i.e. identity, which he have a false identity, or he's lying about his identity, now you can take him into custody. You know what, Mr. So-and-so, such and such, I'm taking you into custody. You're under arrest because I believe you're giving me false information. Okay? Now, once you have him in custody, you don't need a warrant. Okay? Because this is what they call search incident to an arrest. And you can do an inventory search of the contents of that bag. Free of charge. Compliments of the Constitution of the United States of America. Okay? That's not what they did. And this is what the court is going to have to weigh here from the arguments of both sides. There is a possibility that the court could weigh in favor of the Constitution, Fourth and Fifth Amendment in this case. Not the defendant. Remember, it's the Constitution that's at play here. Okay? He just happens to be the bad guy on the other side of that Constitution. However, the Constitution is what's most important. The procedures to that is the training of those officers could have been misguided in terms of how they executed this contact with this guy. Okay? Now, what the court could also do is balance it out. And I've seen the court do it both ways. The court says, well, the officer's intent was not to violate the Constitution or his Miranda right. Okay? So what I'm going to do is balance this out. I'm going to suppress his Miranda, that he should have been read Miranda. However, he did make statements. And the court can rule, if he takes the stand, I will allow the state to use those statements to impeach him if they're different than what he testifies to. So now what the courts have done, what the court does in that potential scenario is it shifts the burden back to the defense when the defendant decides to testify in their own behalf. Now, I don't know a defense attorney worth their salt that would put him on the stand. But you never know what's going to happen, right? Cuckoo Lori Vallow got on the stand, and the rest was just, get the popcorn, get yourself a Snoop Dogg on the stoop, and enjoy the entertainment, because she's going to do the crip walk and not realizing she's cripping it. Okay. I can see Luigi doing the same thing because he's that type of personality. He's done it for the cause, but hopefully his lawyers will keep him in the corral and not let that happen. Okay. So if the court ruled that no, you can't use it in your case in chief, state, you can't bring it in because it's a violation of Miranda. But if he gets on the stand, I will let it come in to use it against him. Now, the bag. If the court feels it was a violation of, search and seizure, the Fourth Amendment, then the court can absolutely 100% say none of this is coming into the trial. Zero. They call that fruit of the poisonous tree. So that means everything after that search is dismissed. It's like dominoes. Boom, 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 boom. They just fall. That would be the gun. That would be the silencer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And how the court's going to rule on that based on the video, what the state would then have to prove, it's actually him in that video holding a gun, the notes, everything goes. Yes, Sean, everything goes. They call it fruit of the poisonous tree, meaning you can't take a bite of it. It's out. And the court can throw it. Okay. I've had it happen. Again, the court has to follow the Constitution. And it's frustrating. If you're pro Luigi, there's gonna be parties, right? The guy's got over $1 million in a fund, a defense fund, if you can buy that. Okay. If you're pro, state, yeah, it's like, what in the world is going on here? But that's the rules. Those are the rules that each and every one of us in the United States benefits from, because it keeps the government in check. And we all want that. Okay. And that's why it's incumbent upon police to know what those rules are. Okay. And like, Terry versus Ohio, pat down searches, contacts versus a detention. I see a lot of officers even today where, they say, well, I'm going to detain you. And then they put handcuffs on them. And then they put them in the back of the car. Okay. You can't do that. You're not supposed to do that at all. Okay. Unless you have a reasonable suspicion or belief that they're a threat, have committed a crime, or about to commit a crime. That is Terry versus Ohio 101. Okay. Every law enforcement officer in this country should know that. If they don't know that, everything they do after that could get suppressed. Okay. 1,000%. But you see it all the time. I watch TV. You see it all the time. Yeah, working in the jail and the prisons are totally different. Right. They've already given up their Fourth and Fifth Amendment. They signed away. It's called a fourth waiver. That's what it's called. So once you get in the prison, your stuff belongs to the prison. The state doesn't belong to you anymore. Okay? Because that's their stuff. But on the street, if you're going to make a contact with somebody, you have the right, okay, if you believe they've committed a crime or about to commit a crime, or you were sent there to investigate a crime, you have the legal right to walk up to somebody and say, look, Mr. Jones, the reason I'm here, okay, is because we got a phone call from that company right there, and they said, okay, you were out here doing something. Now, I'd like to ask you your name, okay, and to find out what you're doing. You don't have the right all the time to say, let me see your ID. You do in a car, because if you're stopping them for a infraction or a vehicle code violation, you have the right to get that driver's license, but not if they're standing on the street. You have a right to what they call a contact under the law. You can walk up to somebody and say, the reason I'm here, again, got a phone call. May I ask what you're doing? That person can say, no, you can't. And I'm standing here on the sidewalk, officer, but I appreciate you coming by. Now that officer's put into a precarious situation. The right thing to do is to say, you know what, you're right. Okay. I can't push that contact any further, whether I like it or not, as a police officer. Can't do that. Okay. Because the moment you do that, now you're stepping into civil rights violation territory. Now, let's change that scenario 1 second or one iota differently. Okay? You walk up and you see maybe what appears to be a weapon in the person's waistband. Now, the law allows you to do what they call a Terry search, because now for your safety, you can articulate, I see what appears to be the outline of a gun or a knife. So for my safety, and you tell them, you know, I'm going to tell you right now, Mr. Jones, okay, I have the legal right to detain you right now. And the reason is, I see what appears to be a weapon. Don't grab it. Now, I've done this drill 1,000 times if you haven't noticed. Okay? Do not go towards that weapon, because then you'll force me to take evasive action as well. Okay? We don't want that. But what I'm going to do is ask you to turn around, put your hands on top of your head, spread your legs, and I'm going to pat you down. Do you understand that? 90% of people who are not doing anything wrong will say, you know what, officer, I understand. And yes, I do have a weapon, not a problem. And they'll do this. And you reach up, you lean back, you pat them down, you secure the weapon. Now you can say one of two things. Sir, I'm going to run this weapon to make sure it's not stolen, okay? And that it's registered appropriately to you. And two, I need your identification. They have to identify themselves now at that point. Okay? They have to. Because at that point now, you can take them into custody, which they could have done with him. They could have said to him, you know what? We have a positive identification that you could be the shooter in New York City. So stand up, turn around, put your hands up behind your back. We're going to take you into custody. Click, click. Okay? Then they could have established his identity. And they could have searched his bag. Search incident to the arrest. And it could have been an inventory search. And they could have opened it up, and none of this suppression hearing in the Luigi case would be going on. Okay? Would be going on at all. So I'm 50-50 right now of how the judge is going to go with this thing. If the judge tosses this stuff and goes with the angles that we've been talking about here, okay, then the next piece of this puzzle, the next big question is going to be, is he going to take the stand? Okay. If he takes the stand, it comes back. The Miranda issue comes back, and all the statements, the body camera, all of that comes into play. The court could also narrow the scope of what the jury would see in that body camera. Okay. Because, you know, that could be prejudicial, you know, to the defendant. You know, well, you've got this over here, you know, that's just too much. So I'm not going to let that in. Then the judge can rule that way. Okay, so there's a lot of different directions the court can go right now based on this contact at the McDonald's. Okay, it could have flowed pretty quickly where you have the RP saying, look, I believe, okay, this guy is your shooter from New York City. Dispatch, why do you believe that? And that 911 call will be crucial. Okay. Because when whatever's put out on the CAD and the officers who are responding are looking at their computer-aided dispatch and their terminal in their car, it's saying RP believes this could be the shooter in New York. Now, from an officer safety position, that elevates the officer's risk. And the courts are always going to lean towards the officer's risk because you just don't know. There's too many variables when you're responding to something you have no idea what's on the other side. So when they get there, they're already up here for officer safety in their thought process. So they approach it with how they approached it. Okay. But that is not a door to start going through the guy's property. It's an opening to say, do you have any guns? Yeah, you ever heard the cops that say, you have any guns, knives, atomic weaponry, any submarines hidden anywhere? No. Do you mind if I search for my safety and for yours? That's called a consent search. Okay. And if the suspect says, no, you can't, guess what? You can't. It's over. Snoop Dogg just jumped out of the hoopy. Okay. And whether we like it or not, that's his right. The dog's right to say, no, you're not doing it, man. Because I don't have, unless you can articulate why you think I'm the dude. And if you do think that I'm the dude, then you need to hook me up and take me in. But if you don't, I'd like to leave now with my Happy Meal and my McNuggets. That's what they also used to call me, McNuggets. Like, man, McNuggets, what's up? But that's the rules. That's the right thing to do. And every cop in the United States should know that. Every cop in the nation knows Terry versus Ohio. And if all of us can look it up, okay? When can you do a contact search or a contact? When does it turn into a detention? When does it turn into an arrest? Now we get into Miranda. Every one of these officers has a Miranda card. Okay. You don't need to read Miranda if they're not in custody in any way, shape, or form. Okay. That's why at a traffic stop, the officer's not saying to you, the officer's not saying to you, well, you're under arrest. Okay. No, you're being detained. So you don't need to read Miranda at that moment. You need to read Miranda when you go hands-on, put the bracelets on them, the matching bracelets for Christmas, matching bracelets, and say, you're not free to leave. I'm detaining you. At that point, okay, you better break that card out and say you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to an attorney, free of charge. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you free of charge. Do you understand these rights if I have explained them to you? Yes. Having these rights in mind, do you wish to speak with me now? No. It's over. Conversation's over. Okay. But you see, even officers today, they don't ask that second question. And I've seen a lot of cases get tossed by the courts because that's not an intelligent waiver. In California, one of the most liberal states in the United States, where I was, where I worked, okay, all these couple of weekends, if you didn't do it right, man, you're going to go up against the courts that are going to say, Goodbye. See ya. Next. And these guys walk. Okay. So you don't have to read Miranda if it's a detention or contact. It's when it becomes an arrest. And when you put a pair of handcuffs on somebody, it's no longer a detention. It is an arrest. Okay. Unless you can articulate per, Mapp versus Ohio and Terry versus Ohio. Okay. Those are two Supreme Court decisions that your safety was in danger, i.e., you saw that gun or you saw that knife or you grabbed that gun or you grabbed that knife. Okay. But what we used to do is you pat them down and then you bring them over and back in the day, you guys probably know, you sit them in front of the car with their hands like that and their legs out in front of them crossed. And then every once in a while you can say, okay, you can put your hands down by your side, but I want to make sure that I see them. Okay. And if you have an articulate ability to articulate why you should search a piece of property nearby, you better be right. You better be right. The plain view doctrine, for an example. If I saw dope sitting out on a car seat, guess what? I get to search your car completely, okay, to look for more dope, okay? And if you're sitting out on the curb and you're not handcuffed at that point, now I can arrest you for that dope. I can go to you and say, guess what? Are you the passenger? Yeah. Okay, stand up. Put your hand behind your back. Click, click. You're under arrest. Let's go. Put him in the seat, in the back seat. That is an arrest. At that moment, Miranda kicks in. Boom. If I want to ask him about that dope at that moment, okay, I have to read Miranda. If I find the dope and I hold it up and say, anybody own this? And I'm just kind of throwing it out there and somebody makes a spontaneous comment like, yeah, it's mine. Okay. I can use that. I can use that. Click. You're in custody. Have a great day. You don't get to pass go and you don't collect $200. Not tonight. You may pay $200. It's called bail, but you're not collecting it. Okay. And so with this particular situation, the court is really going to weigh. I'm going to submit to you, it could go either way right now. If the judge finds and the state argues that you can't argue experience for a law enforcement officer, by the way. You can't argue, to the court that, well, my guy didn't know, Your Honor. No. That's not an excuse for an improper search and seizure. The Constitution says you're an officer of the court. You've been trained. You went through an academy. You learned the law when you left the academy, and now you must apply that law under the Constitution. Failure to do so will result in suppression of evidence. Now, it doesn't mean they get in trouble or, because if that's the case, if every cop who's ever made a mistake, like me, okay, then you'd be sued till kingdom come and you will never, ever have a career and will never, ever have law enforcement officers. But what the court will do is suppress all of that, and that officer hopefully will go back and say, well, I'll never do that again. Okay. And that's where, officers are protected under the law because we're human beings and we do and they all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. That's human nature. Okay. But you should have it down pat, no pun intended, pat down. You should have those laws memorized 1,000%. So you don't make those mistakes when you do come across a Luigi. Okay. So what's the state left with at that point, right? What the state is left with at that point is to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the guy maybe who's dressed up like that executed the executive, and what the evidence they could have is that individual. They have to connect him to the individual in the video. And, maybe they'll do that with the digital footprint. Okay. Maybe they'll do that with, other evidence that we're not aware of. Maybe there's some forensics somewhere on the shell casings, that kind of stuff. Maybe there's DNA. I don't know. Let's pray if in fact they have that, that is the link that puts him at the scene, pulling that trigger. And the officers that investigated that side of the coin, have all those ducks lined up and in a row. It could be a lack of experience. Of course, we can say that. It may be. That doesn't make these officers in any way, shape, or form bad officers. None. Zero. It means they may have never done this before, and all of a sudden they ran into this scenario where they got the guy who has committed this heinous crime sitting at the McDonald's in their city. I just, my heart always goes out to these guys and gals in today's world. But I also, was a supervisor, and it's a time that you have to say in briefing before you even get out there, who does not know the rules? Who doesn't understand the rules? Okay, put your hand up. And John Lamb, my supervisor, used to, grill us. He like, okay, let's go over map versus Ohio. And in briefing, you have a 30-minute briefing before you go 10-8 on the street. And he goes over we go over case law. We had lawyers that would come in from the DA's office. Look up the name Gordon Graham. Gordy would come in, with videos and talk about the laws. And by the way, Gordon Graham is a national individual. He's a great guy. I've known him for many, many years. He used to work at a company called Lexipol, but he was a lawyer up in, he was a double, by the way, in the TV show Chips. While he was going through law school, he was a CHP motor officer up in LA, and he rode motorcycles as a double, for like Ponch and John, and he got through law school. That's how he paid his way through law school, while riding a motorcycle for the TV show. But he was a real CHP officer. And then he became a lawyer, and he's a pretty cool dude. Gordon Graham, look him up. He's funny as all get out. He's a tall guy with a mustache, funny as all heck. Okay, that said, we would have these briefings where it was drilled into you. Okay, what do you do? And we'd have these scenarios that you would reenact. So when you got out on the street and it was real life, okay, that you knew what to do. And you knew how to do it, and you did it correctly so that none of that evidence got suppressed. And the people that needed to be in prison and jail were put in prison and put in jail. And let's hope that is the court's going to rule, in a certain direction, right? Let's see what happens. All right. I've had you 2 hours. Yes, happy birthday, Sebastian. Today's his 17th birthday. And once solved, then that case will be hot in the burner. My personal opinion, don't leave the house. Another shady bunch there. Talk to the ex-wives on who, and we'll get a clarity of understanding. Thank you so much for becoming members. Thank you for always being here. Thank you, Homicide Detective Daughter. You're awesome. And thank you for your kindness for being a member as long as you have. 24 months. Wow. That's crazy. 30 months. I'm grateful to me. I'm grateful that you're here, Plant Lady. We love you. What are some ways law enforcement deal with the people who are deaf? You know what? That is a great question. Okay, so can I share with you a sad experience? And it dealt with a deaf mute. His name was Paul Duffield. And he had broken into a gun store. And while in there, he had done some crazy stuff. Well, at the time, I was a canine handler. Let me take a couple of seconds here. If you give me a couple of seconds. Well, this is such an important question. Okay. It really is. I want to show you something. That's what I'm looking for. So forgive me just for a second. Well, essentially what happens, and I'm looking for the article. I had the article. Is I get to the door of this gun shop. It was called Jerry's Military. And Duffield was in the store in the back. And when I got to the door with Irk, I knelt down and the guy in front of me is a guy named Clint Johnson. And the guy behind me was Kevin Kaiser. The guy behind him was one of my old partners named Rich Davis. We were all stacked up at the door, and I've got Irk as the second guy. And we opened the door, and as we slid the door open, Duffield came up over the counter with a .45 pistol and started shooting at us. And thank the Lord, he was a crappy shot. And he missed. And at the time, I let Irk go. And Irk tackled him in the back of this gun store. And he was on the bite. And I called him out. And he came back to me, and Duffield took the weapon and he put it up. First, he put it in his mouth, and then he moved it and he put it against himself here. And he is mouthing about, do you got it? Oh, my wife just sent it to me. How sweet is that? I love her. Hang on, I'll pull it up. There you go. Here it is. All right, let me add it. Can you guys see this? All right, now you can see it. It says burglar accidentally kills himself. Okay, so what happened was he takes this weapon and he puts it right here. And he's like, he's trying to communicate with me. Oh, mom, and he can't hear and he can't speak. Okay. So now I'm like 5 feet away from this guy. We both have guns. Okay. And I'm pointing mine at his, and he's pointing his against, holding himself hostage. And that's what he's doing. He's holding himself hostage. Okay. And so I don't have any legal right at that point in any way, shape, or form to pull the trigger on my weapon. Granted, he had already fired at us, but at this point, the dog had neutralized him to where he's like 5, 6 feet away from me, and he's holding himself like this, okay? And he's ma, 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 okay? And he's yelling at me like that. And he looks over at, there's a Coke machine in this business, and he yells in his, his tone, okay? Ma, 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 like that. And I'm like, I'm holding, I got my gun, but I'm like, okay, okay, put the gun down, okay? And he's like, ma, ma, and he's holding himself like that, okay? And so my partner puts money into the Coke machine and buys him a Coke, okay? And when you read that article was 1988, April 12th. What happened was he's got the weapon here now. He moved it over to here. And he's about ready to lean forward to get the Coke, and I'm starting to negotiate with him. I had asked for an interpreter, but we can't bring him into the shop at that point for obvious reasons, okay? One of the saddest things that happened in my life was I look up and he leans back and he hits a bookshelf. And there was a guitar case, and it came down and it hit him, and the gun discharged. It was over. It was actually on this side, and he hit the carotid. Remember the shot to Charlie Kirk? Instantaneous. It was over. That's that article. Accidentally kills himself. And I can't tell you, I see that moment still to this day. That was 1988, almost whatever, how many years it's been. I still see that kid. So I learned after that, how we communicate. That was another lesson in life that God taught me. Okay. And it was amazing that, it went down that way. And by the way, at the moment he shot, it was 11 seconds into the door. And I think he fired like 4 or 5 rounds, only by the grace of God that he missed. And within a minute or two, maybe 3 minutes, we had bought him a Coke. Actually, it was a Dr. Pepper because I remember it vividly. And we rolled it towards him, and within 2 seconds of the can leaving my partner's hands, Rich, as he's rolling it at him, he turns over and looks towards the Coke and leans back, and the guitar case is coming down. And he had his legs extended out in front of him. And so the guitar case hit his legs, and that startled him, and he pulled the trigger, and the rest was history. And so the moment I saw that Charlie Kirk shot, that brought that. I even told Karen, and she'll tell you, I told Karen, I said, oh my gosh, I've seen that before. And that was, one of those things where it was ruled, obviously, we did nothing wrong, etc. Okay. But it was a bad day. It was a bad day. Thank you, Maui. We love Maui. She's in Maui. She got Maui'd in Maui. Thank you, Wendy. And I can name a bunch of people that were involved in that incident. I mean, he tried to get out through the roof before we even got in the building. And a guy named Sean Sullivan, one of my old buddies, sees him trying to hit a skylight with the gun in his hand. And he's trying to get out the window, out of the skylight, and just wasn't. Who was Granda's friend that came from out of town? That's Linda. I do not remember, but I do remember that she did have a friend come pick her up. Yeah. And she supposedly took Jose, remember, to North Carolina and dropped him off. Remember that piece of the story, right? Rose Meyer, is that who it is? Rose Meyer? Debbie says it's Rose Meyer. Rose Meyer. Yeah. Okay, guys, it's 2 hours. I've held you too long. I just want each and every one of you know, as we get close to closer and closer to the holiday season here, that many folks on the earth and around us as friends, don't have people around them. And, I know that we here at the TIR family, we continue to grow, and we're just so grateful. If you just tell more and more of your friends that, look, you want a great time to hang out and talk and, just socialize with each other through the chat, come on over. Because that's all Karen and I ask is please hit that subscribe button if you get a chance. That's all we ask. Did you know YouTube, the algorithm tells us like 80% of people that come to the channel don't even subscribe. So I'm missing a lot of subscribers. So if you wouldn't mind hitting that thumbs up, which gets the algorithm kicked off, and then that subscribe button with the bell so you get the notifications. It'd be great to hit 300,000 subscribers, maybe in 2026, but that's okay if we don't, but it certainly would be wonderful if we could. So as they say in Hawaii, be akamai, pay attention to our surroundings, pray for those who have less than ourselves. There's a big Kilauea Iki has just exploded over in the Big Island, which is the great volcano. So you can watch that on YouTube. It's an amazing, spectacular sight, but simultaneously pray for the people that live nearby, as well as the people still recovering in Hawaii from the Maui fires. They still need our help in many ways. I'm sure of it. So aloha, everybody. Continue to take care of each other. We'll see you on the next one.
Hard working every day. I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts. Wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah. Make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away. You and me go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me and taking away, yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now, we're taking away, yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down, we're going away, yeah, we're going away, you and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.